Let's move on to Explosion. Explosion is another Windows box. We're going to dive in and have a good time. So get your poem box ready and let's do this. Oh wait, let me put that music. The reason that I like to keep my my music off during these like official sort of like work throughs is DMCA. If I put this stuff on YouTube and there's like music on there, usually I'll get a DMCA strike, and those aren't good. Those are meant to protect artists' music, so I'm not like stealing it or reposting it and getting all this money because someone wants to listen to a song I didn't make. There's a lot of people that are out there doing that, unfortunately. All right. So there were, and that's why the law came into be. So we're going to work on Explosion, which is another Windows box. And let's get started. So go ahead and start up Pwnbox. Remember to start up your target too, and wait for that IP to show up, and then ping the IP so that you know that the machine is reachable. And I would like to say that ping won't always work in real life. Can anybody tell me in the chat or in the comments why a ping may not always work? And it's not always because the machine is off or broken or unreachable, actually. Sometimes it's by design. I know, a matter of fact, in modern day Windows land, when you do it from a fresh install, ICMP echo requests and ICMP echo replies are blocked, which ping actually is just an executable file that exists on almost every machine to test, connectivity. But in Windows, by default, ICMP echo replies are blocked. And ping is really just generating an ICMP message, which is Internet Control Message Protocol, right? Which is, a protocol used to like test connectivity and do troubleshooting. Like you can use commands like traceroute. I'll show you to see I think it's traceroute in Linux. Yeah, to see like how long it took to get to a site. Like for example, from dang, that was fast for real, Hack2Box. To get from where Hack2Box is to Google's public DNS servers, traceroute used ICMP to find the IP addresses of every single router on the way to the destination, which is 8.8.8.8. So it got there in 9 hops, and it was like dope because it went in under 2 milliseconds. It got there, which is absolutely fascinating that it can be that fast. So it went here, here, here. So the benefit of that, and why I'm going down this rabbit hole that's seemingly unrelated to what we're talking about with Hack2Box here, it's still learning, is that when you're troubleshooting, let's say like an ISP connection or something going on with the internet, you should run a traceroute, because if like the IP addresses are under your control are the expected speeds, then it could be something, an outage or some kind of weird thing going on with routing on one of your service providers. Because you can notice on the way to Google, on the way to Google's DNS servers, this packet traveled to many different providers. Could have been 2 or 3. So you might be paying for AT&T or Spectrum or wherever in your country is the ISP. They also have a provider that they use for the backhaul, larger networks to connect ISPs together. You know what I'm saying? Hey, what's up? Samaj. So, this is traceroute. Okay, why did I say because ICMP is a useful protocol. You guys got to stop me going down those rabbit holes. But ICMP is a useful protocol, but it's not always possible that you'd be able to ping a Windows machine if ICMP by default is blocked, right? So you may actually have to go into the firewall settings in Windows and enable or allow ICMP echo reply and ICMP echo request, both of those. So now, but that said, in Hack the Box land, all Windows machines should respond to a ping. So we did finally get our IP going, which it was up a long time ago. I was just yapping. Yappy McYappingston. And we're getting pinged. So we can try to hack now. And I'm liking the first task. The first task is, what does the 3-letter acronym RDP stand for? I happen to know this very well because I love me some RDP. RDP is a remote desktop protocol, right? You could have asked Grok. You could have asked ChatGPT as well. It's the remote desktop protocol. So that's task 1. I'll show you. It's right there. Task 1 and starting point on Hack the Box. Follow along. Lock in or else. So it says, what is a 3-letter acronym that refers to interaction with the host through the command line interface? That's a weird thing. That's a weird way to word it. Okay. What is the 3-letter acronym that refers to interaction with a host through a command line interface? CLI. Right? What about a graphical user interface? GUI. GUI. And I want to stop there and talk a little bit. Why would you use a GUI? Why would you use a CLI over a GUI? CLIs usually allow you to move a little bit faster, but require more knowledge of the thing. Like we can remember back to when we were doing Redis in the last video with interacting with the database. We didn't really know the syntax, so we had to lean on Grok to kind of teach us the syntax, which is fine now because we know it. And at least we know somewhat. And, the other benefits of that is that you can automate more through a command line. So if you know a series of commands, you could say, Grok, and I'm a big fan of the chat bots. Grok, write me a script that connects to the Redis database and at this IP address and connects to index 0 and drops or displays the contents of the key called flag, right? So you could try to start automating some of the mundane steps. If you're continuing to find yourself, one of my mottos when it comes to automation is like, do it manually until you know how to do it automatically. So if you're constantly doing the same set of steps, try to figure out how to program that, like automate that, right? Software that does that, and then get used to using that automation. We're in the best age for that because you can just ask Grok or ask ChatGPT or ask Claude to help you out with that. And it makes it much easier. So task 3 we know is GUI. GUIs are still nice though. We do live in the age of like really nice GUIs too. Especially when it comes to network devices, I like, for example, Ubiquiti. I do like Ubiquiti because they are creating this user interface via the cloud, this cloud management platform that really creates this incredible experience for IT administrators, in my opinion, because it's like, it's really intuitive. Like when I want to if I want to put a port in a VLAN, I can click on the name of the switch. It takes me to this graphic that shows a switch, and I click on the port. If I want it to be port 3, I click on port 3, and I click the drop down of what VLAN. Click VLAN, apply, or save changes, and boom, here we go. We're done. Versus like, I could do that in Cisco from the command line. I could write a script to do that, and it just kind of does it and queries an API that does that. But like, it is nice to have that visualization as well. The dashboarding, I like GUIs for dashboards to see analytics, to have these nice little graphs, and it's good. So, all right, all that to say, let's move to the next task. Task 4. What is the name of an old remote access tool that came without encryption by default and listens on port 23? I happen to know this off the top of my head, but if you wanted to Google this or grok this, you could ask, what service listens on port 23? And I happen to know that that's Telnet. Telnet is booty. Don't use Telnet because it's clear text. What is clear text? We talked about SSH. We've talked about secure versus not secure when it comes to some protocols. And if it's in clear text, which Telnet is, Telnet was often used to, and still out there, to remote into systems over the network and to connect to the command line of a system over the network. Telnet will send everything you're typing from your machine to that machine, because that's what it's doing. It's helping carry those commands from your machine to the other machine. I think it's easy to forget that we're on another machine if we SSH in or Telnet, but we're still on our machine. So when I type in something, I'm typing it in on the client on my machine, and when I hit enter, it has to send it back to that machine, right? So there is this constant back and forth conversation that can be intercepted. And if there's no encryption, if it's Telnet, then someone could have some kind of listener, some kind of network tap. And if they happen to get my exchange, they open up Wireshark, they just search Telnet, and they find some connections and communications on Telnet. This is why you got to lock down your switches, because if you got hacked and somebody turned on SPAN, which is a switch port analyzer, or basically a packet capture on switch, like on the switch level, it's capturing packets, meaning everything goes through a switch, right? They got every communication over that network for however many days they've been in your network. And then they can find if there's Telnet, right? If there's Telnet, they know they could follow the TCP stream within Wireshark. And it's literally a button you click that says follow TCP stream that looks at the whole conversation. And they can see in clear text every command you typed, including the passwords you typed. Because when you click on Telnet and you're doing different things and you're asked for your password and you type it in your command line, it's got to send that over the network to authenticate. So that's just some food for thought on task 4. What is the name of the service running on port 3389? So let's start to scan this thing. So I'm going to just do a plain old Nmap scan. And it immediately responded. It says, what port is 3389? That's MSWBT server. I happen to know this is the service that remote desktop protocol uses. Just seeing it so much, you will memorize ports. In my first certifications that I took, CCNA was the first ever certification I passed. CCNA did ask about common ports. But I will say in general in the industry, you'll memorize ports as you use them. You don't necessarily, unless you're preparing for a cert exam like CCNA, you don't need to go out there and try to memorize 1,000 ports, right? Like I don't think I even have 1,000 ports memorized, not even close. But I do remember some that I use regularly. That's the practical nature of what you're going to be doing. It's more so about understanding what that port is and that you can use it to connect to some kind of service. So task 5 has our answer. We did it. It's right here. And that came from Enumeration. What is the switch used to specify the target host's IP address using xfreerdp? Right? So xfreerdp, I can tell y'all because I've used it many times, is a command line utility that allows us to interact and to actually establish remote sessions to Windows systems with remote desktop listening. So we see all the different commands here with our xfreerdp. Just to give you a little bit of grok in this video. So the question it did ask us is, How do we specify the target? Let's do this again. I could grep through some of this too, but we won't get that far yet. So that is saying /v ABCD LMNOP QRSTUV. What is the switch used to specify the target's host IP? I happen to know it was V. That was another thing you could have asked Grok. It also shows you examples of how to use it, like using xfreerdp. How do you connect? Like we would want to use a command like this to connect, or this here. It says, what username successfully returns a desktop projection to us with a blank password? We could try as a default administrator. Why would you try administrator? Because administrator is a username we know exists on every Windows instance. So what I'll do is this again. Sorry to keep doing that to y'all. And scroll up. I'm going to grab this right here. And we're just going to edit that. Keyboard, what's up? And we know the IP. I'll just keep that blank because it's giving us a clue. Return administrator. And I'm going over here after the V. We're not putting a host name because right now we don't have DNS. We'll talk about DNS later. And I'll try 13 and try to connect. So xfreerdp, and this xfreerdp is not the only tool that would allow us to try to connect over remote desktop protocol to a Windows machine. You could also use Remina, remote desktop connection from Windows. There's a ton of them. So we are getting a request to trust the certificate. We're saying yes, we're going to trust it, and we have authenticated to the Windows system. So you can see that we've remoted in via RDP. Would you ever see that? I really hope not. There's so many different settings you would have had to the administrator would have had to have disabled so many different default security settings for this to actually work, where you could RDP in to a machine without a password. You just need to know the username. I think you would even have to go into the registry or go into like the default group policies and enable support for like passwordless authentication in Windows. So somebody would have had to have disabled that, in which case I wouldn't be surprised. And this is something I'm gonna I've never seen this happen in the wild, but I'm sure it does. Here's why I'm saying that. Because when you're doing IT, sometimes you're going to get some unreasonable requests. What do I mean? Like, there's some people like, great, they're awesome, they're very understanding. You know, they believe what you're saying, right, to them. Like, this isn't possible, or we shouldn't do this. But there are some people who are going to ask for things that are anything that stands in the way of them doing work on the computer is seen as a obstacle. So passwords, requiring complex passwords, requiring multiple steps of authentication, it's just the worst thing in the entire world. And it's just, they're spending hours working on that, and it's just a huge hinder to their day. And so I would not be surprised if there are people out there, I know without a doubt, there's got to be people out there saying, IT, I need you to remove passwords so I can just get into this system. We don't want to pay for password managers, so we don't want to have to like tell everybody the password. You know, and there's solutions. Like, you can try to enable Windows Hello, which scans a face, allows you to use a PIN, things that are much easier, allows you to use a card reader, an RFID badge, a YubiKey. But you are going to face this as security professionals, and it may surprise you because your world and your communities, like this community, we value tech and we value security, so we understand like how important it is. But that's not the case for most people outside of the industry because they're just trying to do their job. So things that make them do extra steps and slow them down or literally block them can be frustrating. So there is always this constant balance of convenience and security. What can I do to make this computer user experience more convenient while not compromising security? It's a very hard balance to strike. And, there are technologies out there. And I find that when it comes to things like this is an extreme that I would die on the hill and be like, if this thing's internet connected, if it's on the network, we're going to have a password protecting this. Now, if it was not, and it was behind a locked door and you just had to do all this crazy stuff to even get to that computer physically, and it's not on the network, I might entertain the idea of not having passwords at all and just letting you log in and doing whatever we need to do in Windows to enable that ability to just have no password. But for the most part, like, you need a password at very bare minimum. And, I'd even recommend these days two-factor authentication, which you've seen, a password and a code, or a password and a scan of your face or a fingerprint or a YubiKey, two-factor or multi-factor authentication. That's like a default, with a password complexity requirement of at least 12 characters or more. I think Microsoft's recommending it's got to be over 15 characters now. If somebody Google that. But, that's, people aren't going to remember that. So that's where, okay, now if we can't do away with passwords, how do we make it more user-friendly? Because 15 characters is not user-friendly. I would argue once you get to about 12 characters, you're stretching someone's memory because they're busy. If they're a surgeon, they're thinking about what a surgeon does, not how to save their password the best way. So that's where password managers are really good, because the password managers are so good these days, you could not remember most of your passwords or not even ever have seen it. You just have the password manager generate it and save it, and it autofills it in the browser. I would prefer that over somebody picking no password or somebody picking really weak, easy to remember passwords, because they can be brute forced. And that's a whole other thing. Once we get into password attacks and cracking passwords and cracking hashes, we'll talk about the state of passwords and how scary it is, right? And why there's a whole industry of people trying to eliminate the password, which I think is a very interesting concept. But with all that, we did get our flag right here on the desktop. We double click on Notepad, boom, copy and paste that. Yes, you can copy and paste through an RDP session. So for future reference, I can copy and paste things that are on my hacking machine, my phone box, into a system through remote desktop. So if I've done that on engagements, and I've done that in Pro Labs where, you're on multiple systems and you need to get a listener on a system and you already have RDP. Why not just transfer it to that system via RDP, right? That's what what an attacker would try to do, right? As much as they have access, they're going to leverage that. And I think a lot of people overlook the fact that if you have an RDP session, you've got control of the system. It's beyond just controlling the machine. Your session can be used in other ways, like copying and pasting things in. I'll just show you, I could copy this, which wouldn't be useful to us. I'm just showing you the ability to do it and just paste through. See, I mean, it went through, which is like, I'm not saying that's mind blowing, but you may not have thought of that. Like, I can use this system to like transfer files or pull files off. So if an attacker has RDP access to one of your systems, they may use it as a bastion to breach other systems. So, or some people call this a beachhead system. Like, you stormed the beaches, you got there, you set up base, and then you move. Like, and this is another thing, the reason why we should monitor every system, no matter how like critical, because like, even if there's no critical data on the system itself, it could be used to move further. So we got a Raspberry Pi somewhere on the network that's just cool. It shows something, shows like some dashboard, and that's all it does, and we never update it. Like, if we're doing that, we probably should monitor it because it's on the network, it has internet connectivity, and it could be used for that purpose. The hacker's not going to jump, a smart hacker's not going to jump on there and just like be like destroying everything and make it clear they're there. Like, that's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to get noticed in most cases until they've done their worst. Like, if you study any hack, like significant hack, they don't really drop off ransomware as the first step, right? So like, you should read the DFIR report. I recommend it. It's very, very informative. The DFIR report talks about all these different hacks, and they sanitize anything that's not like anything that would tell on their clients. I'll just show you. So the DFIR report, free blog, and it's written by incident responders, so people in cybersecurity, incident responders that are helping companies recover from a hack, and they write it up in a very technical way, right? So you're reading actual commands and tactics that the hackers did when they got on there. Only you'll see like redacted, right? So no actual names of any of the people that work at these companies, or even the name of the company, just to protect the company. And it's very familiar, right? You're like, this is a lot of the stuff I've done before. If you're in pen testing, and these are things you do want to simulate as a pen tester, because remember what the value of a pen test is to really test and assess the readiness of an organization to respond to this kind of attack, because it does exist. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's why pen testers exist, and that's why personally I think that pen testing is a super, like, I see pen testers as security engineers, because you are looking at the security from an engineering perspective. It's not just it's not just about offense; it's about defense, because you got to check to make sure the defenses work. Like, otherwise, you're living in this world of like, just you bought the latest firewall, you bought this AV or EDR, and you just trust it because you spent a lot of money on it. And I would imagine that your expectations would be high if you spent that much money, because cybersecurity is not cheap. And, but how do you know it works? And I feel like the only way is if you get hacked, or like, and I mean like in a real, like you really get hacked, or there's an attempt, or you get a pen testing group, like a team, to come in and they will emulate it. So in this case, you'll see like a lot of times, and I'm saying like you've got these systems on your network you're not monitoring, but they're network connected, or they're unmanaged too. Like that's a big risk, not in the fact that it's just misconfigured or that it's just inherently vulnerable, but that if an attacker did get in, they would use that. And they may use that as a persistence point. They're living in your network. You're not doing monitoring. You don't care about security. It's not high priority. somebody might be on your network just living there and just extracting all the secrets y'all got, just, committing crime from your network, just doing all kinds of stuff. So that's where I would say that I think it's very important to monitor your environments. And we could do a whole series on like network monitoring. But for now, that was that box, Explosion. Explosion is teaching us RDP and what it means. You can do it from Linux, you can do it from Mac, you can remote into systems, and this is an administrative advantage. A lot of people who work remote would want to remote into their system at work, right? And you could do that if you have a VPN. You don't technically have to spend a lot of money on like a remote access tool like a TeamViewer or AnyDesk. Like, I like those, don't get me wrong, especially AnyDesk. But you could use remote desktop. It's already there. It's a service you can enable. And as long as you can gain remote access into a network so that your machine you want to remote in from is on that network, and it can reach those systems, you could remote in via RDP. There's some features RDP doesn't give you, though, but that's Exploitation.